I'm so honored this morning to introduce to you Haley Hoover. She's the dynamic founder of Winnie and Lou, a company that creates timeless products for babies. But these products are built to last beyond that baby stage. She merges her passion for luxury and sustainability with her entrepreneurial spirit to craft elegant, functional items that enhance modern family life. I'd love to see your catalog. It sounds so interesting.
Thank you.
Haley, you were born to be a mother. Can you describe your expectations for motherhood?
My expectations were quite different from the reality that I came into. I was naturally born with the maternal instinct from an early age. I treated my little brother like a baby doll. And I started babysitting for other children at a pretty young age when you consider the magnitude of that responsibility. And
Yeah.
so when the time came for me to start my own family, I just thought that I would naturally have this easy breezy pregnancy. I would have this picture perfect birth. I had worked in the OBGYN space for many years prior to even getting married. So I knew a lot about the pregnancy journey. And I thought that I was more than equipped to get exactly what I wanted out of that experience. And the first rule of parenthood should be don't have any plans or expectations because they will get derailed. And that is exactly what happened when my first came into the world. And then ever since that moment, it's just been like all of the things that I pictured, all of the ways I envisioned myself as a mom really shifted and changed because I think that when you're fantasizing about becoming a mom at a young age, you're not thinking about the constant laundry that needs to get done or the home repairs that need to be tackled or just the regular day-to-day stuff of having a family with a home and other responsibilities. So motherhood doesn't look the same as it did when I was in those early adolescent years, but it's definitely been rewarding in ways that I never anticipated.
Both extremes, right? I had the same experience. I was expecting this Gerber baby, that would smell good and look up at me with loving eyes. And he happened to be an ADHD kid
Oh
that
yeah.
was present from birth. He had trouble sleeping. Motherhood wasn't what I expected either.
Yeah, I
So
imagine.
you wrote an article titled, uh, let's see, it's titled Five Effective Strategies for Mental Well-Being, and it's
Yeah.
about dealing with anxiety. So when you were given this shocking surprise that motherhood wasn't what you were expecting, it created quite a problem. Do you want to describe for the other mothers that will probably be listening to this video what that surprise was like?
Yeah, absolutely. I had always kind of had an anxious nature about myself. I always say I don't idle very well. I love to be busy. I constantly love to be doing things, experiencing things, trying things. And motherhood really slows you down from doing that. And I had planned to have natural birth where I would be up walking around shortly after the delivery. And my little peanut that came first decided to flip back breech the night before his induction. And so I went from having a birth that I was hoping would be completely, little to no medical intervention to very full medical intervention because I ended up having to be readmitted after I had delivered and spend some time in the hospital under observation and getting care to make sure that my blood pressure wasn't getting too high after delivery. And so I think that that moment of completely losing control over something that I tried to plan to a T really threw me into a mindset that I had not been familiar with before. And couple that with the fact that your hormones are all over the place, you're not sleeping, everything is new. At the time, my husband and I were living in Kansas, and we had not a really great support system. We didn't have any family around. And so it was just a very isolating experience. And
Yes.
so I think that sometimes being in that lack of control, and coupled with the fact that there was just so much newness and uncertainty kind of playing out, just created this perfect storm of anxiety in my brain in a way that was very different than I had experienced anxiety previously in my adult life. And where I normally would be able to think quickly on my feet or not have to over process things, I quickly found myself just frozen and paralyzed. I couldn't make decisions. I lived in constant paranoia that something was going to happen to my husband when he left for work, or something was going to happen to the baby when we went to bed, or just very different mindsets than I had ever experienced before. And I admittedly at that time just ignored it. I thought that this too shall pass. I will get through it. And I don't think that it ever really fully went away. And I do think part of that now is because I never addressed it. I never looked at it. And so we've almost 2 years to the date had a second baby, and the exact same postpartum experience occurred. And this time, the postpartum anxiety was so hard to ignore that even my obstetrician, when I went in for one of my checkups, was just like, you are textbook signs of postpartum depression and anxiety. And it took me just dropping my ego at the door and dropping that mindset that I can do this. I was made to do this, and letting those feelings and pride sit down for a second, and actually listening to this provider and saying, this is not who you are, and this is not normal, and this can be stopped. And really taking her advice to seek some alternatives to get over what I was going through.
For those of us who are high achievers and tend to be organized and in control, it is really hard to submit, to the reality that we need help.
Yes. And especially, I think, as women and as mothers, and for me in particular, I think a lot of it stemmed from the fact that for multiple decades, people had shared with me how amazing of a mom they thought that I would be. And
Yeah,
so when my body, quote unquote, failed and didn't have this birth that I had envisioned, and then my body, quote unquote, failed and didn't have this natural bounce back after that delivery, and then my body failed when I had this postpartum anxiety, I think I just wasn't realizing kind of the negative perception I was putting on myself for
yes,
those things that were completely out of my control, and
yeah,
that are also completely common things to have happen in, the ages of giving birth to children.
yeah. Postpartum depression is a joy killer. We
So
want to be joyful with this new life we brought into the world. What can you recommend that helped pull you through those dark months?
it was definitely not a one thing. I would have to say that first, just having my OB hit me right square in the eyes and say, like, recognize that this is not you, and that this can be addressed, and that we can help you. That was the biggest thing for me, was to just listen to somebody else say,
Mm-hmm.
I don't recognize you right now. The other person that was really pivotal was my husband. I was very open with him about how I was feeling and what I was experiencing, and he was incredibly compassionate and understanding, and obviously concerned, wanting to make sure that, I'm safe and our kids are safe. Um, but then, besides just the personal relationships, it was really, medication helped me a lot. I was trying to do a lot of, like, natural supplementation to try to help my hormones and help my mood elevators kind of boost themselves. And I was just in such a dark spot that it wasn't enough. And
Yeah.
so I really appreciated that my OB was like, you can continue with the supplements, you can continue with the natural side of things. But I really do think that starting you on a low dose medication for just a short period of time will help give you kind of the extra boost that your body needs to get through it. And I was really grateful that she had that conversation with me, because I think even still today, we talk very openly about mental health and anxiety and depression in a way that we didn't talk about it many years ago. But I do still think that some people are uncomfortable when they start thinking about adding medications to treat those things. And
Right.
I, for one, was one of those. I have always been a very positive mindset person. I've always kind of been able to pick one foot up in front of the other and keep moving. And I appreciated so much that my doctor said to me, you are still putting one foot in front of the other, but you're making it so much more challenging for yourself. You're basically marching yourself through quicksand when you could be walking on a more firm beach, is basically how she put it. And that was just like, okay, I'll try it. And that little bit just helped me kind of get over the hump to really start to implement some of the other things that I still use today, like exercise is probably the biggest stress reliever, which I know the majority of the masses want to hate people that say that. But it's like you get this pent up energy that needs to come out. It's like a puppy. And your body wants to move and work and be put to the test. And so pregnancy and childbirth did put me to the test, but my body wanted to be tested in other ways. And so I ultimately started doing indoor rowing and
Hmm.
loved it so much that I got certified as a row coach, and just found that accountability of needing to be at the studio so many times a week and working out so frequently, and then also sharing that with other people who were on their own fitness journeys, gave me the confidence that I had kind of lost, that I thought that I had lost by not having these birth and delivery experiences that I had planned for myself, where I thought that I had quote unquote failed, and I in fact had not.
So it gave you confidence back in your body
Oh, yes.
to be able to thrive with exercise. You made this statement, I love it. Self care isn't selfish. Would you care to elaborate?
So I have a husband that works a very intense and busy job. I have two kids that are under the age of 5 that are highly active and all over the place. I have two dogs that are 3 years old, border collies, so they need a lot of energy releases. And then I run two businesses. So I need to have things in my life that I do just for me and for my well-being. And I never kick myself for taking a nap during the middle of the day when my body's telling me that I need to rest.
Mhm.
Because I know that if I take that 20-minute nap, that I'm going to be such a better mom for the next 4 hours when my kids are home and we're going through the scramble of practice and dinner and bath time and homework and all of that. Um, and I do consider that to be self-care. And I think that societally, we put self-care in weird buckets. One, it's either like it needs to be all or nothing,
Yeah.
and it needs to be like a full day or a full week or something big and major. But the second that I started to find self-care moments in just little pockets of the day, it was almost like weight loss or trying to build muscle or trying to learn a new language. You just snip off little bites that you can chew here and there, and self-care is no different. And I think that people who continually put their self-care on the back burner are actually being more selfish
Yes.
than people who lean into it,
Yeah.
because you're taking away the best parts of who you are by not listening to what your body needs.
I think it's almost magical what a 10 or 20-minute nap will do for me in the
Oh,
afternoon.
yeah.
It's, it's amazing how refreshing that small amount of time is. You,
Yes. And or even just like sometimes I'll go sit out in my backyard and just sit at our little patio table and just watch the trees blow.
mhm.
Listen to anything, not watch anything. I don't take my phone out there. I'll just sit there and feel the sunshine, feel the fresh air. And It's 5 minutes. I don't feel bad about that.
Those moments of quietness are almost like meditation,
Yes.
and they're wonderful antidotes for those of us who like to be in control. Said you mentioned that you used to depend on control to manage anxiety. Of course, we need to have some control, but how do you balance the need to control with the realities of your days? I think you may have answered that in part already.
Yeah. Well, I think that the self-care kind of plays into that. I
Yes,
think that it didn't come overnight, but I needed to learn. It's kind of like you pick your battles, right? Is having the completely tidy countertop 24/7 so important that I'm willing to drive myself into a spiral in my own head? Or can we just let a few stacks of paper sit there until I can get to it a few days later so that I can have a playful moment with my kids? Because I do think that that is an area that I'm continually needing to work on still is the to-do list never stops.
right,
Work, whether it's home, whether it's kids, it never stops. Having the ability to say, okay, I can stop this task right now because it's done well enough. It doesn't need to be perfect. I can go spend 5 minutes one on one with my child and get that connection with them. That's all that they need. And
right.
giving them that 5 minutes of undivided attention, I then get their trust, their attention, their energy, so that I'm not exhausting more of my energy trying to get them to fall in line with what I need them to do for the hours that they're home.
Yeah,
And I think that that has been one of the biggest things that I've had to remind myself to do is make those little times where you can control it. So when the kids are at school, I try to bake in a little bit of that self-care time. Or for example, I outsourced my laundry because that was just something that always felt out of control and never caught up on. And so just having the ability to have that task taken off of my plate gave me room to breathe and just, I don't need to control how the laundry gets done. Somebody else can do that. I can control how it gets put away. So
yeah.
making those trades where it makes sense.
I love that you changed your belief that vulnerability is an asset, not a bad thing. And why is vulnerability an asset?
I firmly believe and have lived by this motto since my early 20s that you only ever grow if you live outside your comfort zone. And one of the best ways to get uncomfortable is to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And I think that when you fall in love, you become vulnerable. When you become a parent, you become vulnerable. When you announce a business, you become vulnerable. Anything that can kind of make the hair on the back of your neck stand up a little bit, anything that can make you in the moment be like, is this a crazy idea? Is good for you. Is
Yeah,
good it's good to, like, kind of push the envelope a little bit, make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, and just kind of feel that adrenaline rush as you get through it. And I think that we look at vulnerability as a negative, and in reality, I think the more vulnerable we allow ourselves to be in safe spaces, the more we will learn about ourselves and ultimately live a happier life.
because good relationships, particularly marriage relationships, are my passion. I
Mhm.
was so impressed that you were so vulnerable with your husband during those difficult months. You and that he was willing to hear
Mhm.
your feeling and was so supportive. Um, I just appreciated hearing that about your relationship.
Thank you. Yeah, my
Yes,
husband is, I'm very fortunate that I'm the talker, but he's the communicator. And he is very much a good listener. And I like to say he's a problem solver, but he's not always trying to come up with a solution. Sometimes just letting you get it off your chest is all you need. And he's really good about being understanding and sympathetic to my feelings, which can be all over the place.
well, many times a good listener is the only help you need, you know.
Exactly. I agree completely.
As the head of a business, you must still have days of extreme anxiety. On
Every
a,
day.
okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, what level of anxiety was common in the bad times and what is it now?
I mean, being a small business owner is you wear 100 hats. And so some days you may have anxiety about cash flow, and other days you have anxiety about inventory, and other days you have anxiety about shipments. It's just like there's never a dull moment. And if I allowed all of that anxiety to just sit and fester in my head the way that it used to, I would not be successful as a mother, as a wife, as a business owner, as a family member, friend, any of it. I would be crumbled. And so I think that, like we were talking about earlier, baking in those self-care moments throughout the day, throughout the week where you can. And maybe that's even like you love Britney Spears and you listen to Britney Spears with the windows down the whole commute to work one day, and that's like your self-care moment. That's enough to boost your mood and like get you to stop thinking about the negativity or stop worrying about the possible what if, to just reframe your brain into something that's a little bit more positive, a little bit more fun, and try to get through it. And sometimes that doesn't work. And then you know that you need to face what you're thinking about a little bit more in depth. But I do think that finding those moments of those little pockets of time where you can take a moment to breathe and meditate and laugh and just think quietly really helps me control all of the anxiety as a business owner. And some days are easier said than done, but for the most part, it keeps everything going.
How do you recognize when your anxiety is controlling you versus what you can do to control it? I think, again, you may have almost answered that question with your previous answer, but is there anything you'd like to add?
Sometimes I try to anticipate where patterns are. So as a woman hormonally, I will look like I try not to schedule a ton of big things that I need to be completely on for during certain weeks of the month. And that's just for my own mental abilities, because I already know that certain times of the month I'm going to have more energy and pep in my step. And those are the times where I can coast through anything. It's the times where I'm having to kind of like carry the sandbags that I feel like I become anxious that I'm not showing up in my best way, or that I'm not delivering on the promise to the best of my abilities, because I'm overextended or overwhelmed, and I don't have the energy to support the tasks of that week. So I try to manage it a little bit ahead of time. If I do see that I'm going to have a busier week, I try to really structure my meal planning, because I do think that diet is incredibly important to how I feel with my anxiety as well. I always notice the more junk food or processed foods that I'm eating, the more anxious thoughts that I tend to have. But it's the basic stuff. Like if we can all move more and eat cleaner, it just kind of cleans out the gunk in your body and your brain and really helps. And I hate that I am one of those people that preaches that. But it's what works. I mean, I've tried so many different things, and that is what it's like a non-negotiable. I consider my workout and my meal prep is pretty much like showering and brushing my teeth. It's a necessity for my day-to-day life.
I've been interviewing a whole lot of business owners the last few months, and it's amazing to me how frequently the word non-negotiable comes up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that there are certain things that are non-negotiable, and they're the pillars that support the life that you want to live.
Absolutely.
Thank you for using that word. Thank you for all your great tips and
Thank you for talking with me.
for joining me here today. You can find her business at Winnie and Lou. That's WINNIEANDLU.com. Where did you come up with the name for your business?
So I actually wanted to have a third baby, and after my two postpartums were a little complicated, I was recommended that that would not be a safe decision. So when I couldn't have my other babies, we decided to adopt our dog babies,
Oh,
and their names are Winnie and Lula. And so when I got the idea for my business, I decided to name them after my office mates, and my third baby is my business. And so everything that kind of ties into Winnie and Lou goes back to that third baby. So the dogs are, they carry the name of the business.
thank you again. It's such a pleasure to meet you. And I recommend that the viewers read her entire article on Authority Magazine. It was full of many good tips. I have a good friend who recently went through a really bad bout with postpartum depression, and a lot of what you're saying is what she's also begun to use to help
For
get her
sure.
through.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you.